My elder sister and I were adopted by the richest family at the same time. One stayed at home to be a playmate for the richest man's son, and the other was sent to the old house to accompany the richest man's father in his old age. In my previous life, looking at the handsome and gentle appearance of the young master, my elder sister did not hesitate to stay. But the young master seemed gentle on the surface, but was actually a psychopathic sadist. In just a few years, he tortured my elder sister into being disabled in both legs. With the support of the old man, I studied abroad, entered the entertainment industry, and became the youngest triple golden actress. So my elder sister, regardless of pulling me to die in the fire together, also wanted to be reborn. But elder sister, no matter how abnormal the young master is, he is only a teenager. But the old man has lived most of his life and is extremely shrewd. One step too late. Melissa and I were still adopted. Melissa suddenly knelt down in front of old man George and said with tears streaming down her face, "Grandpa, let me accompany you. You look very much like my grandpa. Seeing you is like seeing my grandpa. It's extremely cordial. From now on, I will respect you as if you were my own grandpa." Seeing this scene, I realized that Melissa and I were reborn together. On this day in my previous life, my elder sister Melissa and I were adopted by the richest family. The current patriarch of the Charles family is this old man George. There are few people in his branch of the family. Now there are only 2 people, him and his grandson. Old man George asked Melissa and me to choose whether to follow him or his grandson Charles. In my previous life, when Melissa saw that Charles was handsome, without hesitation, she chose Charles first. I was left by old man George. But that Charles was only a teenager and already a pervert. Melissa suffered all kinds of torture by his side. In the end, she was even tortured into disability by Charles and had to sit in a wheelchair for life. While I was raised by old man George, I became proficient in all aspects of music, chess, calligraphy, and painting and grew up to be very beautiful. I was also sent abroad to study by old man George. After returning to China, I entered the entertainment industry. With the network background and financial support of the George family, I had a smooth journey in the entertainment industry and finally became a popular top-tier starlet. Later, because of a movie, I entered the film industry and became the youngest triple golden actress at one stroke, enjoying boundless glory in the eyes of outsiders. The lives of Melissa and I are as different as heaven and earth. Melissa also thinks so, but she doesn't hate Charles. Instead, she becomes jealous of me and turns into hatred. On the night when I received my 3rd triple golden award trophy, she burned me to death. And because of her inconvenient legs and feet, she was engulfed by the fire. Now that she has been reborn, Melissa wants to snatch my life at the first moment. In fact, she doesn't need to snatch it. I can give it to her with both hands. After all, no matter how abnormal Charles is now, he is only a teenager. How can he be as sophisticated as old man George? To old man George nodded in satisfaction. A glint that was hard to detect flashed in the bottom of his eyes. "Well, seeing that you are so filial, then you can follow me." Melissa was so excited that she kowowed 3 times to old man George. Then she stood up, took old man George's arm, and said obediently, "Grandpa, I'll help you." Old man George nodded with a smile. "Good child. Good child." Then he pointed at me casually. "From now on, you will follow Charles." After saying that, he meaningfully reminded Charles again, "Charles, take good care of your younger sister. Do you understand?" Melissa pursed her lips and suppressed a smile. She said to Charles, "Brother, I'll leave my younger sister to you. You must take good care of her." She deliberately emphasized the word, good. Then she glanced at me triumphantly and helped old man George go upstairs. I coldly looked at Melissa's back and slowly curled up the corners of my mouth. "Then you can enjoy your brand new life well. However, since it is a life you snatched, don't return it." Suddenly, a sinister voice rang in my ear. Haven't seen enough? My heart skipped a beat. Only then did I turn to look at Charles. Although he was only 15 years old, this child did indeed look gloomy and terrifying and not like a normal person. It's also not easy to deal with. I must not be careless. Taking a deep breath, I immediately smiled sweetly, ran to him, and greeted him obediently. Hello, brother. I'm Stella. From now on, I'll be your younger sister. Charles' cold gaze subtly looked me up and down. Those pitch-black eyes seemed to be lit up by something. I saw the strong interest in the bottom of his eyes. You want to be my younger sister? Only a ghost would want to be his younger sister. What can I do? I am only an 8-year-old child now, and have been adopted by this family of perverts. I can't escape. Even if I kill him, I can't avoid the revenge of the George family. Of course, I can only be a younger sister obediently for now. I nodded, yes. Then I tilted my head and looked at him timidly yet full of hope. Brother, don't you like me? Charles' lips curled up in an almost imperceptible arc. His eyebrows raised slightly, and he said with a faint smile, like. Of course I like. I went forward and took Charles' arm, and excitedly shouted, Great! I have a brother. I have a brother. Charles' body suddenly stiffened. In the next second, he suddenly pushed me away. His fierce gaze heavily fell on me who was sitting on the ground. His thin lips parted slightly, and he said word by word, Get lost. From now on, without my permission, don't touch me. So moody. He is really a little pervert. Melissa didn't know when she stood by the handrail on the second floor and just looked at me. Seeing that I was abused by Charles as soon as I arrived at this family, she seemed to enjoy it very much. Until the butler behind her reminded her, Miss, it's getting late. You should wash up and go to bed. Okay. Melissa replied and glanced at me triumphantly and left. I got up from the ground and walked to Charles. I stretched out my small hand and firmly hugged his arm. No. I want to hug you. I want a brother. I know that at this moment, I must look like an abandoned puppy, only able to hide in a corner and whimper. Charles' body stiffened again. But this time, he didn't push me away again. Although I wasn't by Charles' side in my previous life, I also knew him very well. The reason why this naughty child is so abnormal is because he lacks love. His parents died early. Even when they were alive, they would quarrel every 3 days and fight every 5 days. Because the two of them got married for business purposes and had no feelings at all, every time they quarreled, they would get a divorce. And in front of little Charles, they would say, That's your son. Take him away. He came out of your belly. Take him away. I don't want him. Later, one time when the two of them quarreled again, they fought in front of Charles. His mother accidentally stabbed his father to death. In panic, his mother also committed suicide. Charles was only 5 years old that year. Looking at the two people lying in a pool of blood, he was extremely calm. Later, he has always been by old man George's side. And what kind of good person can that old pervert George teach? Before Charles' father got married, he often played with women together with old man George. Threesomes and foursomes were common occurrences. He didn't accompany Charles much either. He was only busy playing with little boys and girls, and then pursuing eternal life. Charles grew up to be 15 years old in such an environment. If he isn't abnormal, then who is? I decided to influence him with love. Whether it's useful or not, try it first. In case it's useful? If this method doesn't work, it's not too late to try other methods. Charles just moved out on his own when he turned 15. At this moment, he gave me a dark look and then looked at my small hand that was tightly holding his arm. Without saying anything else, he walked on his own. His legs were really long. At only 15 years old, he was already 1.80 meters. I was less than 1.30 meters. I really couldn't keep up with him. Brother, I deliberately said in a childish voice. Slow down. I can't keep up with you. Brother, will you carry me? Charles frowned slightly and impatiently glared at me. Shut up. If you make any more noise, I'll throw you into the sea to feed the sharks. I burst into tears with a wow. Brother is bad. Whew. I don't want to be fed to the sharks. I'm afraid of pain. Woo. While crying, I burrowed into Charles' arms and wiped my tears and snot on him. To a certain extent, I was testing where Charles' taller and slim it for me was. If he was just for bally fierce even when I was making such a fuss, then I would know my limits. Shut up. Charles pointed at me. If you cry one more time, I'll feed you to the sharks. I immediately closed my mouth tightly, looked at him with teary eyes, sobbing, and my shoulders were also twitching. Charles gritted his teeth and closed his eyes. Probably he had never seen such a troublesome naughty child like me and was extremely annoyed. I looked at him nervously. Don't let him lose his temper so quickly. Did I make a bit too much of a fuss just now? Charles suddenly bent down. I was startled and quickly covered my buttocks. Brother. Don't hit me. Charles. His expression was very complicated. His two thick eyebrows were always furrowed. He picked me up and strode out. Phew. This hurdle is past. Then should I be a bit bolder? I put my arms around Charles' neck. Brother. You're not angry with me anymore? Then will you still throw me into the sea to feed the sharks? Brother. I will definitely be good in the future. Don't be angry with me and don't abandon me. Okay? My elder sister doesn't want me anymore. Now I only have you. Charles took a deep breath and looked at me with disgust on the side. After meeting my aggrieved and pitiful little eyes, he finally gave in. I won't abandon you for now. But if you are not obedient in the future, I will still throw you into the sea to feed the sharks. I giggled and rubbed my small face against Charles' neck. I knew that brother you wouldn't abandon me. Brother. You are so kind. Charles. Can you shut up? Yes. Brother. I know. Brother. Charles. He gritted his teeth and muttered, I really want to sew your mouth shut. How much does he dislike my mouth? For when we arrived at Charles' house, he threw me into a room and left. This person is not only abnormal but also withdrawn. He doesn't allow servants to stay overnight here. He left a child like me here. How can I take care of myself? Fortunately, I am not a child. After washing up, I went out wearing a bath towel. After looking everywhere, I couldn't find children's clothes. There weren't even adult clothes. He really isn't cut out to raise a child. I went out to look for clothes. Charles' deep voice rang out without warning and startled me. What are you doing? I silently took a deep breath, adjusted my mood, turned around and pouted and said, Brother. I'm all clean after washing. But I don't have any clothes to wear. Since seeing me, Charles' two eyebrows had never been apart. At this moment, his impatience was even more overwhelming. Why are you so troublesome? I squatted down with my back to Charles and hummed, Brother. Do you hate me again? Why do you hate me? What did I do wrong? Footsteps came from behind. Even the carpet couldn't muffle his footsteps. It could be seen how annoyed he was. Soon, Charles brought a short-sleeved shirt and threw it on me. Put it on. Hurry up and go back to your room and sleep. Don't come out again tonight. Oh. I took the clothes off my head, got up and nodded at him, and then waved my hand. Brother. Good night. Charles ignored me and turned and left. I took the clothes and went back to the bedroom and locked the door. When I sat on the bed, I slightly breathed a sigh of relief. Has this first day passed safely? But I still need to be cautious. It's better to sleep with one eye open. 5. The result of sleeping with one eye open is that I didn't sleep well all night. In fact, in my previous life, how many peaceful sleeps did I have? Even during the time abroad, I was also afraid. Old man George would suddenly push open my door. Melissa didn't know. In my previous life, I suffered from severe depression. So for me, that fire was liberation. Now everything can start over. I must work hard and must save myself. The sky outside is already bright. I was still wearing the clothes Charles gave me last night, and went out barefoot. When I went downstairs, I only saw an aunt busy in the kitchen. When she saw me, her face was full of kind smiles. "This is Stella, right?" I nodded. "Yes. Auntie, where is my brother?" "He left early in the morning, but he asked me to come over earlier to cook for you." The breakfast was very sumptuous, but I didn't have much appetite. After only eating a few bites, I put down my chopsticks and thought about how I should talk to him when Charles came back. I wanted to go to school. Charles didn't come back until after 11 o'clock at night. When I heard the sound at the bedroom door, I took a deep breath and was mentally prepared before going out. Charles had already returned to his room. But when I entered, I didn't see him. There was a faint sound of water coming from the bathroom. I knew he was taking a shower. So I climbed onto his bed. When Charles came out and saw me on the bed, his face instantly darkened. "Who allowed you to sleep here? Get off." I held the quilt and shrank back. "But I'm afraid." "Brother, I want to sleep with you." Just as he was about to get angry, I started crying. Woo-woo. I could see a deep sense of powerlessness on Charles' face, mixed with a murderous aura. He was really a complicated person. He closed his eyes. After a long time, he squeezed out a swear word from between his teeth. I pretended to be ignorant and asked, "Brother, what do you mean by what you said?" "Shut up." Charles suddenly came over, lifted the quilt and picked me up. Just as I was about to open my mouth and cry, he pointed at me to stop me. He threw me back on the bed. "You go to school tomorrow." "That's it?" "It's too smooth." 6. It was only after a week of going to school that I saw Melissa at school. She was wearing an expensive princess dress and carrying a delicate little basket. As soon as she entered the classroom, she placed gifts on each desk one by one. When she came to my desk, she gave me a provocative look, then put a small box on my desk and left. After distributing gifts to everyone without missing anyone, Melissa walked to the front again and gracefully bowed to everyone. "Hello everyone. I'm Melissa. I'm the granddaughter of Old Man George of the richest George family. Please take care of me in the future." Just this opening remark made me doubt that Melissa hadn't been reborn at all. Otherwise, how could a soul in her 20s say such pretentious words when facing a group of 8-year-old children? What's the point of showing off in front of a group of children? A boy named Jason in the class pointed at Melissa and asked. Melissa paused slightly. A hint of embarrassment flashed between her eyebrows. But in the next second she raised her chin again. "I was adopted by the richest family. What's your relationship with Stella?" Someone pointed at me and asked. "You two look so alike." Melissa glanced at me, pursed her lips, and went down without saying a word. The head teacher then spoke up. "Okay, let's welcome the new classmate with applause and then start class." My desk mate leaned over and asked me in a low voice, "Do you know the new classmate?" I just nodded. But I didn't say that Melissa was my fraternal twin sister. After class, Melissa called me to an empty corner of the playground and warned me, "Stella, although we are sisters and were adopted by the George family at the same time, you followed Charles and I followed Grandpa. Now we don't live together anymore. Let's have less contact in the future." Since she said so, what could I say? I could only nod. Melissa looked me up and down and suddenly laughed. "How is it? Is it uncomfortable being with Charles? Look at what you're wearing." "What is it?" She whirled around in front of me. "This was bought for me by Grandpa." "How is it? Is it beautiful?" Seeing that I didn't speak, Melissa raised her chin again. "In short, don't come to me for anything in the future. I won't help you. Since it's like this, Stella, let's each endure our own sins and sufferings." After she finished speaking, she turned and walked towards the teaching building and muttered again, "Anyway, I will never suffer again." It could be seen that Old Man George hadn't made a move on her these days. But don't worry. It will be soon. Sure enough, a few days later, I suddenly received a message. Old Man George took Stella abroad for convalescence. In my previous life. It was when I was in college that old man George took me abroad. Why is it so soon this life? Could it be that the news I released has taken effect? Noticing my surprise, Charles sneered coldly. Looking closely, that smile was extremely cruel. Your elder sister has wanted everything from the moment she was by Grandpa's side until now. It seems that she has caught Grandpa's appetite. Don't worry. That place abroad is open. Grandpa will fill her up well. I could only pretend to be confused. But in my heart, I was very clear. It was Melissa's prematurely exposed greedy nature that harmed her. Moreover, I also gave it a push. 7 time flies. When I saw Melissa again, it was when we were 18 years old. As an exchange student, she came to my university. In the blink of an eye, we hadn't seen each other for 10 years. Her appearance hadn't changed much compared to her previous life. She still looked lifeless. But she was dressed much more luxuriously than in her previous life. In her previous life, she was tortured by that pervert Charles. In this life, the person who tortures her has become old man George. Although the object has changed, they ultimately end up in the same place. Fate is determined by heaven. The 2 of us sisters died together, and were reborn together. Now we are in the same university, and are assigned to the same dormitory. When I opened the door and entered, she was sitting blankly by the bed. Hearing the sound, she jumped up like a frightened rabbit. Seeing it was me, she was in a trance for a moment, but seemed to be relieved. It's you. Melissa slightly raised her chin and looked me up and down. How have you been these years? Has that pervert Charles been good to you? Just as I was about to open my mouth, a soft chuckle came from behind. Charles came over and stopped beside me, still carrying my suitcase. His indifferent gaze swept over Melissa, and he asked casually, I don't know when I became a pervert. When Melissa saw Charles, her already bad complexion became even paler. Just like I had a shadow over old man George, Melissa also had a shadow over Charles. She swallowed and her voice became somewhat hoarse. I was talking nonsense. I'm sorry. Charles didn't look at her anymore and didn't say anything. Instead, he glanced around the dormitory and then went over to make my bed for me. He started to pack my luggage again, folding my clothes neatly and putting them in the cabinet. After finishing, he told me again, the driver has been left for you. If you want to go home after class, call me at any time and I'll pick you up. If you don't need me to pick you up, let the driver take you to the company first. After saying that, he glanced at the environment in the dormitory again. It's okay to experience living here for a few days. It's still more convenient to live in a house off campus. I finally lived like a normal person in this life. Now I am like an ordinary college student. I don't want to move off campus to live. I want to live here. Charles nodded. Okay. It's all done. I'll leave first. He walked in front of me, just like when I was a child. He gently rubbed my head. Then he gave a warning look at Melissa and went out. When I sent him down, and came back, I met Melissa's incredulous gaze. She couldn't wait to ask me, why is he so good to you? Melissa's breakdown came so quickly that it was beyond my expectation. I deliberately made an expression as if it was a matter of course. He is my brother. Isn't it natural for him to be good to me? Isn't Grandpa George good to you? Melissa collapsed. She sat down by the bed, holding her head, as if she was trapped in extreme pain and couldn't extricate herself. She was also murmuring, it's not like this. It shouldn't be like this. Suddenly, she stood up again and came up to pull at my clothes. I pushed her away. What are you doing? Melissa's face flushed red. She kept shaking her head, and the flesh on her face was trembling. She was like being possessed and reached out to me again. Take off your clothes. Let me see. Let me see. I want to see. She was really stimulated. More serious than me in my previous life. Old man George really didn't disappoint me. A tie pushed Melissa away again and slapped her hard across the face. Are you awake? Melissa stood there motionless as if the power had been cut off. I went up and grabbed her arm, pretending to be concerned. Elder sister. Elder sister. What's wrong with you? Don't scare me. Melissa pushed me away forcefully and glared at me resentfully, with unwilling tears flowing from her eyes. Why? Why is everyone so good to you? Grandpa George is. And so is Charles. Why on earth? Why are they treating me like this? Why? My elder sister. How would you know? In my previous life, I was severely tortured by Old Man George. If you hadn't burned me to death, I would still be living in that living hell. I don't know when I could save myself. In fact, in my previous life, I thought about saving myself, reporting to the police or running away. In short, when I grew up, I could do all these things. But that dead pervert Old Man George seemed to see through my thoughts. Don't try to escape. And don't try to find the police to help you. Even if you don't think about whether your little arms can defeat my big thigh, you should also think about your elder sister. Your every move is in my sight. Don't be impulsive. Otherwise, not only your life is in danger, but even your elder sister. I will let her be buried with you. Stella, you stay by Grandpa's side obediently and accompany Grandpa. In the future, Grandpa's things will all be yours. Isn't Grandpa good to you? Living under his oppression and PUA for a long time, I finally gave in. But it was this elder sister I wanted to protect who, in the end, burned me to death out of jealousy. I lived such a joke in my previous life. Isn't Melissa in this life the same? I looked at her inferently and sneered silently. Elder sister, did Grandpa abuse you? What on earth did he do to you? Melissa wiped away her tears with one hand and suddenly smiled at me again. I'm fine. I'm very well. I'm just under a lot of pressure recently. You don't know yet, do you? I'm going to be a big star. I nodded. Then congratulations. The entertainment industry is a place without moral bottom line. It's not a good place to go. Not to mention being sent in by Old Man George. What will happen is already obvious. Melissa raised her chin proudly. When I become a big star, everything will be solved easily. If someone bullies me again, my fans won't agree. As if seeing a beautiful future right in front of her, the flesh on Melissa's face started to tremble again. This time it was trembling with excitement. 9. Although it is already autumn, the weather is still very hot. In the morning, looking at Melissa's long-sleeved pajamas, I deliberately asked, "Aren't you hot wearing long-sleeved pajamas now?" In fact, I just asked casually. If I can stimulate her, then I will. If I can't stimulate her, it's no loss for me. But this sentence really stimulated Melissa. I can wear whatever I like. What does it have to do with you? I pretended to be angry. I just care about you. Why are you so fierce? I got out of bed and went to the bathroom to wash up. Suddenly Melissa's voice rang out again behind me. Stella. In fact, you are not living well either. Right? I paused and turned to look at her, pretending not to hear clearly. What did you say? Don't pretend. Melissa sneered coldly. That Charles is the best at acting. Now even you are so good at acting. Her gaze fell on my legs and she laughed. I advise you to make good use of your legs while you can still run and jump. Don't wait until you can't use them anymore and regret it. She was talking about herself in her previous life. I lowered my head and glanced at my legs, muttered, "Don't talk nonsense," and went into the bathroom. Of course, Melissa wasn't talking nonsense. She was just waiting for the day when my legs were broken by Charles. She was waiting to see my joke. But soon, my chance to counterattack came. 10 and I soon got this chance. After the military training ended, Charles came to pick me up at school. Grandpa said that the two of us should go back to the old house for a meal. Charles controlled the steering wheel with both hands, looking straight ahead. His voice was faint, and there was no fluctuation. I was going to see that person again. I looked out of the window and just gave a faint Charles seemed to glance at me sideways. Are you nervous? Or is it because you don't want to see Grandpa? I turned back and sat properly. Just as I was about to speak, I heard Charles say again, "If you don't want to see him, you don't have to. That old guy is nothing good to see." Yes. How could Charles not know his grandpa? Although I haven't seen grandpa for 10 years. But that's your grandpa. And he's also my grandpa. Let's still see him. After I finished speaking, I added another sentence. It's not like seeing him every day. Charles, as they say, disasters last for 1,000 years. Indeed. Old man George is already in his 80s this year. Except for a little problem with his heart. He is quite healthy in other aspects. Even the heart problem is nothing to him. He is rich. Any kind of special medicine costs several million or even tens of millions. It seems that this money is not spent in vain. Maybe old man George really found the secret recipe for eternal life. I sneered in my heart. But on the surface I looked obedient and followed Charles in. Grandpa. Charles' voice was flat as he greeted. I bowed. Hello. Grandpa. Old man George had an extra cane in his hand. He looked me up and down and smiled. That look was all too familiar to me. It was like a toad sticking out its tongue and licking me all over. It was really disgusting. Charles took 2 steps towards me slightly, just blocking the gaze that old man George had on me. Old man George took back his gaze and nodded. He took out a red envelope and gave it to me. Stella. In these years, Grandpa has been abroad and hasn't seen you. I haven't given you any gifts. I've neglected you. This is a little token of Grandpa's. Take it. Don't say that Grandpa is partial to your elder sister. Looking at old man George's outstretched hand made me feel sick. I hesitated and didn't want to take it. Melissa came down from upstairs. Still wearing long clothes and long pants. Grandpa gave you a red envelope. Just take it. You can't refuse an old person's kindness. You are so ignorant. She came over and urged me again, take it quickly. Forget it. If I don't take the money given for free, am I a fool? Just as I was about to reach out my hand, a big palm took the red envelope from old man George's hand first. He opened it and took out a bank card. With a chuckle, he said, "It seems that the amount is not small. Grandpa, I'll take it for Stella." After saying that, he reminded me again, "Stella, don't thank Grandpa yet." I quickly nodded. "Thank you, Grandpa." Old man George, you med, after all. You didn't grow up by my side. You are estranged from me. Unlike your elder sister. He patted the place beside him. Melissa. Sit by Grandpa's side. Melissa only hesitated for a second before sitting down. Old man George's old hand seemingly casually patted Melissa's thigh. But he was looking at me. Stella. It's not that Grandpa is criticizing you. You are not as likable as your elder sister. You haven't smiled since you entered. Looking at the old pervert's face, I really couldn't smile. I even wanted to punch him and knock out his teeth. But I still pulled the corners of my mouth and smiled. Old man George stood up with his cane. Charles. Come with me to the study. I have something to tell you. Charles said something to me and then helped old man George go upstairs. 11 Melissa coldly stared at the backs of those 2 people. When they weren't paying attention, she dusted off her thigh with her hand as if there was something dirty there. Then she took my hand again. Stella. We haven't seen each other for many years. Stay here tonight. I sneered in my heart. With this acting skill, she still wants to enter the entertainment industry? Her attitude towards me at school before suddenly changed. If there wasn't something fishy, what else could it be? I looked upstairs. I don't know. I have to ask my brother. Only if he agrees can I stay. I said this on purpose. And Melissa really believed it. I just said so. What did you say? I asked. Melissa proudly raised her eyebrows. Nothing. I'll go upstairs and prepare a room for you first. I also followed her up. When I reached the door of the study, I stopped and heard old man George's low roar coming from inside. Bastard. Bastard. Now even you don't listen to me anymore. Charles' cold voice followed immediately. Grandpa. You are so old. You have played everything you should have played. It's time to stop and cultivate your moral character. Old Man George's cane knocked on the ground, making a dull sound. You must send that Stella to me tonight. My body stiffened. It seemed that all the blood in my body flowed backward. My hands clenched tightly. It turned out that Melissa also had this idea. But after all, I was just angry and not afraid anymore. All these years by Charles' side, I have brainwashed him a lot. I have also reminded him in many ways, both explicitly and implicitly, to hold the power of the George family in his own hands, so that he doesn't have to be at the mercy of Old Man George anymore. Oh, by the way, my actions also contributed to Old Man George going abroad early in this life. It was I who released the news that an island abroad had developed an elixir of immortality, and that island was also known to Old Man George before. Naturally, he believed it deeply. Suddenly, there was silence in the study. Suddenly, Old Man George's fearful voice rang out. You. What are you going to do? Charles. Are you going to attack me? I am your grandpa. Charles laughed extremely coldly. That voice seemed to come from hell, carrying a bone-chilling coldness. Grandpa. You are old. I said that you should cultivate your moral character. But usually I don't care how you play outside. That Melissa has nothing to do with me either. You can do whatever you want with her. But Stella is my bottom line. I remind you not to touch her. Old Man George's aged voice trembled. You. What do you want? What can you do to me? Charles let out a barely audible chuckle. I can't do much to you either. But you are old. If you suddenly die, it's also very normal. Don't you think so? Charles. What are you going to do? Old Man George let out a painful sound. Just kidding. Don't take it seriously. Charles said lazily. I only heard this much and then turned and went downstairs. Soon Melissa also came down. She excitedly said to me, I have prepared a room for you. Stella, you must stay tonight. She won't stay. Charles. Unhurried voice came from above. Melissa's body stiffened. Instinctively, she let go of my hand. Charles came down a few steps and came to my side. Leave now? I shook my head. Let's have a meal first. After all, we should have a meal with Grandpa. Charles' deep gaze silently looked at me for a while and then nodded. 12 at the dining table. I became very talkative. It seemed that I had endless things to say to Old Man George. Old Man George even praised me for being sweet-tongued. Charles naturally saw my strangeness. But he didn't say anything. He just ate slowly and elegantly. I took back my gaze from him and continued to say to Old Man George, Grandpa, you don't know, right? My elder sister is the school beauty of our school. Just a few days after the start of school, she already has a large number of suitors. Melissa's hand loosened and the chopsticks in her hand fell to the ground. The smile on Old Man George's lips froze. In the next second, he smiled again and asked the servant to pick up the chopsticks, and gave Melissa a new pair of chopsticks. Be careful, he reminded. Melissa's voice trembled slightly. Grandpa, don't listen to Stella's nonsense. I don't have any boys chasing me. Why not? I have seen it. I chuckled. Are you shy in front of Grandpa? Elder sister, you are 18 years old. You can fall in love. Grandpa won't stop you from falling in love. Right. Melissa lowered her head to eat and whispered an order. Shut up. Suddenly thinking of something, she raised her head and looked at Charles. My younger sister also has many suitors at school. Brother, don't you mind? Charles looked at me sideways and raised his hand to touch my head again. The most important thing for you now is to study. We'll talk about it after you graduate from college. I nodded. Melissa's eyes flashed with a trace of unwillingness. But when she met Charles' gaze, her face turned pale and she quickly lowered her head. The hand holding the chopsticks was trembling. After eating, Charles took me away. Along the way, he was very quiet and didn't say a word. When we got home, I was about to go upstairs directly. Charles' voice rang out behind me. Do you want to watch a good show? I turned around. What good show? I really didn't know about this. Come with me. Charles took my hand and went upstairs to his study. He turned on the computer and just clicked on a software. Immediately, Melissa's heart-wrenching voice came from inside. Grandpa. I really didn't. No, Grandpa, please. It hurts. Grandpa, it hurts. Don't hit me anymore. My internal organs began to tremble. And then my whole body. Suddenly, it reached a critical point. I covered my ears with force. No. Charles quickly turned it off and hugged me. Stella, don't be afraid. It's all Brother's fault. Brother is bad. I pushed him away and hit him hard. Why? Why did you let me listen to this? Charles. I hate you. I hate you. I hate you. I hate old man George. I hate Melissa. I want them to die miserably. 13 Charles just stood there, motionless, and let me vent. I didn't know how long I hit him. It was not until my arms were tired and had no strength at all that I stopped. Are you feeling better? Charles sighed and hugged me in his arms again, gently patting my back. He said, I will never let you see such things again. I nodded. I just want to tell you that there is no good man. Looking at how that old guy treats your elder sister, you should understand. Stay away from that old man in the future. Except for me. Don't go over when anyone calls you. Did you hear that? I nodded again. Then I looked up at him and said, Are you not a good person either? Charles was amused by my words and said, What do you think? I looked at him carefully. In my heart, Charles has never been a good person. But all these years, he was really very fierce to me at the beginning. But that was only for half a year. Later and later. Until now, he has really been very, very good to me. Stella, I am not a good person. Charles looked into my eyes. But I will try to be a good brother. I will protect you and won't let you be hurt in any way. I shook my head. You don't have to try. You are already a good brother. Charles chuckled. Is your standard for a good brother so low? I also laughed and felt much more relaxed. Then you should demand high standards of yourself. Charles took me out of the study. Stay away from your elder sister too. I will tell your school to let her change to another dormitory. No. I held Charles' hand and stopped. Charles turned around. Don't tell me that you didn't see tonight that she wanted to send you to that old guy to be tortured. And you still treat her as your elder sister? No. Since I was 8 years old. I no longer have an elder sister. Now I only have you. But I have to keep an eye on her. Only in this way will I feel more secure. At worst, you can send someone to protect me. Charles rubbed my head again. Okay. Go back to your room quickly and rest early. 14 on Monday. Melissa didn't come. Although I didn't see the specific scene that day. Just listening to Melissa's heart-wrenching voice, I knew that she was tortured badly by that old pervert. It wasn't until half a month later that Melissa came to school. Looking thinner again. I pretended to be worried and asked her, Elder sister, where have you been during this time? Your complexion doesn't look very good. Melissa reflexively held her cheek and suddenly glared at me. None of your business? I shrugged. Just caring about you. You'd better care about yourself. Don't let someone break your leg. Melissa said impatiently, and went into the bathroom. There was still that strong perfume smell on her body in the dormitory. It was choking. After a long time, Melissa came out of the bathroom. She tittied up and then went to class. I also came to the classroom but didn't sit with Melissa. The perfume smell on her body was really too strong. Classmates also started to complain. Melissa, why are you spraying so much perfume? It gives me a headache. Melissa immediately retorted. Where is it strong? Don't be jealous if you can't afford big brand perfumes. Everyone stayed far away from her. Melissa didn't care either. But when she returned to the dormitory, she complained to me. Those people in our class don't have much ability one by one, but they have a lot of problems. What's wrong with me spraying some perfume? I told the truth. Your perfume smell is really too strong. It's choking. Melissa immediately gave me a supercilious look. You are the same as them. Anyway, I won't stay in school for long. I'm about to enter the entertainment industry. 1 night a few days later, Melissa and I were doing our own things in the dormitory. Melissa's cell phone rang suddenly. After answering the phone, she immediately ran over and showed off to me. Stella, I'm going to enter the entertainment industry and become a big star. Grandpa asked me to go over now and take me to meet the director and producer. The bad memories of my previous life suddenly rushed into my mind. I nodded slowly. Then go quickly. Melissa put on her most beautiful clothes and put on an exquisite makeup. Then she went out happily. I suddenly thought of something and immediately called the bodyguard arranged by Charles by my side and asked one of them to follow Melissa. When they arrived at a private club, the bodyguard couldn't get in and called me. I called Charles again and asked him to think of a way. Charles knew what I wanted to do. After a moment of silence, he said, "Let the bodyguard go back. I'll send someone in." I responded and hung up the phone. But until after 12 o'clock, I didn't receive a message from Charles. So I fell asleep. The next morning when I woke up, Melissa still hadn't returned. I washed up and called Charles. Did you find out anything last night? Charles was silent for a while and said, It's just that kind of thing. You should be able to guess. Can I see it? I asked. Charles didn't answer me but asked me, Why do you want to see this? After saying that, he hung up the phone directly. In the afternoon, I didn't have class. Charles came to pick me up and took me to the house near the school. He played a recording for me. Inside were all men's lewd laughter. Immediately after was old man George's lewd and perverted voice. Melissa, work harder and serve these people well. Melissa couldn't say anything and could only make woo-woo sounds. Old man George was displeased. How did I teach you usually? Don't you want to enter the entertainment industry? Charles picked up his phone. Okay. The rest is not for you to listen to. I still say the same thing. Stay away from your elder sister and that old guy. I suddenly thought of a good idea and involuntarily curved the corners of my mouth. Suddenly my chin tightened. Charles pinched my chin hard. It hurt so much. His dark eyes stared at me and warned in a deep voice. Behave yourself. Did you hear me? It hurts. I slapped his hand. You pinched me so hard. Charles immediately let go and then came over to check my chin. So delicate. I didn't use much force at all. How much force do you want to use? Your chin will be pinched off by you. I complained. He raised his hand and knocked on my head. Behave yourself. Remember, I don't know what you are thinking. But I know that you don't like your elder sister and that old guy. If you don't like looking at them, you can tell me directly. I'll get rid of them. But Stella, if I find out that you are doing something behind my back, I will really beat you up. I knew that Charles said this because he was worried about me having an accident. I went forward and put my arms around his neck. Brother, you are so good. Charles looked at me silently for a while and sighed. Just because of your call of brother, I feel like I've been involved in this for my whole life. It's not worth it. I nodded and let go of him. Okay. Then you don't want me as your younger sister anymore. Don't talk nonsense. Charles' voice became a bit lower. He didn't like to hear this. 16 This time Melissa returned to school very quickly. In the dormitory, she happily told me, I will start filming soon. The script has been decided. As soon as the team is set up, I will start shooting immediately. Congratulations. Melissa snorted proudly and went into the bathroom again. The perfume smell on her body is really getting stronger and stronger. Is it to cover up the old person smell on old man George? Before starting shooting, Melissa still attended classes normally. But these days she is obviously much more active than before. She tells everyone that she is about to start filming. There are classmates who respond to her. Naturally, there are also those who are envious. This day when I just entered the classroom, I saw a group of people surrounding Melissa. Can you take me with you? I don't have high demands. Just being an extra is fine. Me? My lines are not bad. Give me a couple of lines. Melissa really enjoyed this feeling of being surrounded by everyone. Suddenly, someone shouted, "Ah! Why is it so stinky? Did someone defecate? So disgusting." A group of people who were surrounding Melissa just now instantly dispersed. Others also packed up their things and ran out of the classroom together. I was about to run with everyone, but I saw Melissa standing still. Someone behind said, "Melissa defected." That classroom was always ventilated. We were moved to another classroom. But Melissa was gone. After class in the afternoon, Charles came to pick me up. "Your elder sister is in the hospital again. Do you know? I knew that Melissa should have had another accident again. But I didn't know that she was in the hospital." "Why?" Charles coughed lightly. "I won't say it. I'm afraid it will disgust you. Thinking of the scene in the classroom today, and be associated with everything Melissa has experienced. And then looking it up online. Even if Charles didn't say it, I guessed 8 or 9 points. Melissa should have anal fistula. The sphincter is also useless. So she has fecal and urinary incontinence. No wonder she has been spraying such strong perfume. It turns out it was to cover up the smell. But obviously, this smell cannot be covered up. I thought about it and asked Charles to take me to the hospital. He was silent for a while, and still took me there. I entered Melissa's ward. He and the bodyguards were guarding at the door. "Elder sister." As soon as I walked to the bedside, Melissa shouted like crazy. Charles came in. After making sure I was okay, he went out again. "Get out." Melissa's face was pale. She was like a fierce ghost crawling out of hell. Her face was full of unwillingness and resentment. "Did you come to see my joke?" I sighed. "Elder sister, don't be like this. I'm really worried about you. Although you can't be a big star anymore, you should also think about Grandpa. Grandpa is already old. His heart is not good. He takes medicine every day. If something really happens to you and stimulates him, what will Grandpa do?" I deliberately emphasized the words big star, heart disease, and taking medicine. I think Melissa can understand. Sure enough, Melissa, who was going crazy on the bed, suddenly stopped. She looked up at me and laughed loudly. Charles came in again and dragged me out. Melissa was still laughing loudly. Charles dragged me all the way into the car and asked me sternly, "What are you doing? Didn't I tell you? If you want to do something, tell me and I'll do it. Who allowed you to take risks?" He has been getting more and more fierce recently. "This is because you are protecting me outside." "I'm not afraid." "What are you afraid of?" "You." Charles glared at me. After a long time, he turned around and no longer looked at me. Instead, he looked out of the window. His voice was a bit ethereal. "Stella, I only have you now. I know he is afraid that something will happen to me. But, for some things, I want to do them myself. I want to take revenge for myself." I went over and hugged him. "Brother, I won't let anything happen to me." 17 Melissa didn't disappoint me either. After she was discharged from the hospital, she went home directly. The next day, I received the news of Old Man George's death. At that moment, the heavy mountain in my heart finally disappeared. Dead. That old pervert finally died. That's great. Without anyone telling me. I also know. Old Man George died of a heart attack. His heart couldn't bear that deadly pleasure. The medicine was gone. So he just died like that. After Old Man George's funeral, Melissa ran to the company and said she wanted to hold a shareholders meeting. The shareholders all went. As a shareholder, I naturally had to be present. Melissa was very surprised to see me. What are you doing here? I smiled slightly. I am a shareholder. Charles passed by between me and Melissa and pulled me in. Melissa walked to the front. Grandpa is dead, he said before that after his death. All his things will be left to me. So from now on, I am the chairman of this company. Hearing this, the shareholders looked at each other and laughed. Little girl, we come to the meeting to give you face. But you can't play tricks on us like this. Melissa's face was anxious. Who is playing tricks on you? Grandpa has a will. Zachary smiled and waved his hand. No need for a will. The shares in your grandpa's hands have already been in General Charles' hands. He doesn't have much property under his name. Melissa was stunned. What? She was full of disbelief. How is that possible? This is impossible. Zachary then said. Now the largest shareholder of the company is General Charles. The second largest shareholder is our Miss Stella. He pointed at me. Melissa still didn't believe it. This is impossible. She suddenly went crazy. Pointing at me. Her voice was sharp and piercing. Stella, why haven't your legs become lame yet? Charles, break her legs quickly. Hurry up. Charles coldly glanced at Melissa and asked someone to throw her out. This shareholders' meeting was a joke. Charles and I walked out together. There is a surveillance camera in the old guy's bedroom. Melissa deliberately took away his medicine and committed premeditated murder. I called the police. Thinking of something. He smiled faintly again. Can't you take the civil service exam anymore? Suddenly, a harsh and John sound rang out. Charles and I looked over at the same time. Melissa was in the car. With a stomp on the accelerator. She crazily crashed towards Charles and me. That ferocious face was like Shura from hell. Her lip shape seemed to be shouting, die. Everything seemed to happen in an instant. I didn't even have time to react when I was pushed hard by Charles. Then with a bang, Charles flew out. Melissa's car hit the big pillar at the entrance of the company. She died on the spot. 2 days later, Charles woke up, but the way he looked at me was like he had become a different person. As soon as I was about to call out, he stopped me. He asked me a thought-provoking question. Did you make the right choice in this life? My body suddenly stiffened. You. Charles awake and his memories of his previous life. You know everything? Even lying on the hospital bed. Charles still exuded a powerful aura all over his body. Stella, you are really my good sister. My heartbeat accelerated. After a long time, I finally found my voice. I'll go find a doctor. Just as I walked to the door, Charles' voice rang out again. Stella. I paused and slowly turned around. Meeting his gaze, he looked at me. After a long time. Have you ever regarded me as your brother? He asked. I just looked at him. Charles' gaze became deep, as if expecting something. Even for a moment. Did you have any sincerity towards me? I looked at the man on the bed. Finally, I lowered my eyelids and murmured. I'm sorry. Charles. I have been using you all along. For so many years. My use of you has penetrated deep into my bones. All along, there has only been myself in my heart. Except for myself. It seems that I will no longer have feelings for anyone else. I'll go find a doctor. The doctor told me that Charles was out of life danger. But he still needed to stay in the hospital for observation. I nodded. Then I'll go home and get some things for him. After packing up Charles' personal belongings, I returned to the hospital. But Charles' hospital bed was empty. My heart skipped a beat. And it seemed as if my heart had also become empty. Behind me came the nurse's sigh. Originally, there was no life-threatening situation. How could he suddenly pass away? I stood still on the spot. At this moment, it seemed as if the whole world had lost contact with me. I don't know how long it took. So long that it seemed as if a century had passed. Suddenly, a familiar voice came from behind. Stella. My body stiffened and I slowly turned around. Charles. leaning on a cane and wearing a hospital gown, came into my view. But why couldn't I see his face clearly? "Why are you crying?" he asked. I touched my cheek. It was wet. So I was crying. My throat was sour and hot. I opened my mouth. After a long time, I finally made a sound. "I thought you were dead." Charles chuckled. "Isn't that better?" At this moment, the tears completely burst the banks. I could feel my lips trembling violently. And my voice was also choked. "No. If that's the case, I won't have a brother anymore. It's been 10 years. I have always wrapped myself in calmness and selfishness. But Charles still infiltrated my world little by little. He is my brother. No matter whether he was a pervert in his previous life or whether he is a good person. I don't care. He is just my brother." Charles walked over leaning on a cane and wiped away my tears with his other hand. "Don't cry. Brother won't die. As long as you still need brother, I will always be by your side and protect you." I nodded. "Okay.